Emily is our speaker, and she's the creator and author of the Growing Little Leaves blog. And since 2014, she's designed and presented beginner genealogy and heritage classes for both adults and children. She's also had the privilege of speaking at the FGS conference and at RootsTech, and she's currently employed as a reference staff member for the Cuyahoga County Public Library system in Cleveland. So I will go ahead and hand it over to her and let her get started.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. I'm honored to have been asked to speak about my little old website, Growing Little Leaves. So as Kate said, I started Growing Little Leaves in 2014. So it's been 10 years now. At the time, my kids were, they were little, and now they're teenagers. They're 16 and 13. And you'll see them in a lot of the photos of when we were doing some of these activities together. They were kind of like my guinea pigs. And, you know, I haven't updated the website in a while. I mean, I haven't added any new activities, but I've kept it going. Every so often I'll get a nice little email from a teacher or a librarian or church leader that is telling me, you know, hey, I loved this little printable that you made, this little worksheet, or we used this activity at one of our functions. And that means a lot to me. So I've kind of kept the website going, and it seems to still be helpful to people. And everything I talk about today, all the activities, you will find on the website. So I don't have a handout for you today, but everything is free to view, free to download from the website. So you should be able to find it there. Okay, why teach kids about their family history? So there are all kinds of studies that have kind of determined that kids who know more about their family history are generally more resilient, they have a better sense of self, they have higher self-esteem, and they are able to deal with adversities better. So we could talk a whole hour about, you know, just those studies, but we're not going to do that. But I will direct you to this little part of my website, this little link that says resources. So if you click on that link, and it's not a fancy web page, but I have just basically listed all the links that I have found out there, and some of them are actual documents that you can download that outline some of the research studies and papers that kind of talk about the benefits of sharing family history with children and teens, and the benefits of storytelling overall as well. So I urge you to kind of peruse that at your leisure if you're really interested in some of the research. So what is the mission and philosophy of Growing Little Leaves and of the activities that are found on the website? So let's go through some of these. I do want to say that there is never a, you know, one size fits all kind of approach to teaching kids and teens about their family history. What will work for my family might not work for yours. But hopefully in sharing some of these activities that I've created, you'll be inspired to use them and to adapt them and adjust them to what works best for your family situation and for your kids. Okay, so we want to tailor activities and games, whatever we're using, towards each child's individual interests and abilities. So for example, on the website, you'll see a lot of activities involving drawing. And that's because my son at that age he loved to draw. So I used that and I created activities around it so that it kept him interesting and engaged. We want to remember that we're working with short attention spans with children. So we want to be adaptable, and, you know, maybe doing some of these activities, you need to split them up into smaller time frames so, you know, the kids stay engaged. We want to recognize children as active learners, meaning, you know, they need to move around and they need to use their bodies. and as sensory learners, meaning that they don't just learn through sight and hearing, they learn through touch and all of their senses. So I tried to keep that in mind when I was designing a lot of these activities. I tried as much as possible to include inclusive and adaptable activities. The family unit is much different than it used to be. And we need to be able to include all types of families into learning about family history. I tried, when possible, to have interdisciplinary activities. So you'll see some examples. I incorporated math concepts. I incorporated geography concepts. We did a little bit of handwriting and, just basic reading and sight words, that type of thing. And I've got activities and advice that spans all the way from the toddler years through the teen years. And for me, I'm constantly coming up with new teen ideas because I have teens now, and it's a bit of a challenge. And but it's good. It's really making me think of ways to engage them. Okay, so here is the main website again, and I want to direct your attention now to this link here, which is activities. So almost all of these activities that we're going to look at is found on that link, and I list them all out for you. So that's another good place to look. Okay, so before we start teaching kids about family history, we need to make sure they know their current family members. So the first couple of activities are going to focus on learning our present extended family and the vocabulary associated with family. What is an uncle? An uncle is mom's brother. Who is grandpa? Grandpa is my dad, is mom's dad. So you can start teaching even toddlers this vocabulary right off the bat. And it's such an important stepping stone that will help them once we start actually talking about relationships and family history. So that is something you can start right away with toddlers and preschoolers. And this is just one of those things. I made these little, and I laminated them, little family flashcards. So it was hard for my family because my husband and I, we lived far away. We lived in a different state from our in-laws and from my family. So my kids didn't get to see Uncle Mike as often as some kids would. So I made these little flashcards and we would go through them together. And, I laminated them so you could take them to church or, anywhere just to have something to do. I put them on a little ring there. And this is just something easy you can do to help them learn who their present day family members are. And then the next one, I had these little foam shamrocks. It must have been around St. Patrick's Day. But anyway, all I did was I printed out some photos and I put some tape over them and I threw them on the floor and I said, hop on Grandma Kay, hop on Aunt Kara. And this was a great way to get the energy out, and it was a fun little game, and they were learning who their family members are. And you could even, when they get a little bit older and you start talking about, the ancestors, great-grandparents or whoever, you could adapt that to put those family members on there too. Before we look at any other activities, I want to just mention this. This is something you can start when your kids are toddlers. I want you to it's very important, I think, to take your children to historical places. Yes, a cemetery counts as a historical place, and we'll talk about other activities that you can do at the cemetery. But when your kids are young, when they're toddlers and preschoolers, take them to the cemetery. Even if it's a cemetery that doesn't have your particular ancestors in them, take them there. We used to live outside of Indianapolis, and we used to go to Crown Hill Cemetery all the time. There's so few places these days where you can just wander around on a nice day and get some energy out. And when you take the toddlers and the preschoolers, it's a great time to begin teaching them about cemetery safety and etiquette. And the youngest children, they don't have that preconception of death freaking them out yet. So to them, it's just a park. It's just a nice place to go. And so it's kind of a way to normalize being in a cemetery, as a normal part of our culture and society. So go take them to cemeteries. My husband and I are history nerds. We go to all kinds of national monuments and national parks. So take your little kids to these places. This is my son in St. Augustine at the Castillo de San Marcos. And we took him there. He was 2 years old. And, it's really great for their vocabulary development, even if they aren't speaking yet. He learns what the word fort meant because this was a fort. When most kids are thinking a fort is, that blanket thing that you build, under a table, but this is a real fort. He learned what a cannon was. And I should say, he wasn't even really speaking at this point. We were in the middle of speech therapy. But as you can see, he enjoyed himself. But absolutely take your little kids to these historical places. Okay, so let's get into some of the activities listed on the website itself. Okay, so tactile family trees. Remember, children are tactile learners. They are using their sense of touch. They are using feel to learn a lot about their world and their environment and about other things. So this one is called the Play-Doh pedigree chart, and it's just what it looks like. It's Play-Doh with some toothpicks, and we had different colors for the different generations. And as we rolled each one, we talked about who it would represent. And you probably can't even see, but we made little faces on them too to represent people. So that's something that even the youngest ones can do, and you don't know how much they're absorbing, but you'd be surprised at what sticks, even at the young ages. This one I called it the family tree in a tin. And I made these little cards, and I found these little alligator clips. I think I found them on Amazon. Oh, by the way, for all of my blog posts, in all of the blog posts, if I usually tried to mention what craft supplies you would need if you wanted to do a particular activity. So all of that information is there. But I found these little alligator clips where you could link the cards together. And believe it or not, all the cards and the clips fit in an Altoid tin. So it's totally portable. You can take it anywhere. And I laminated the cards so that it'll last through spills and drops and all kinds of stuff. And another one was just using popsicle sticks. You can either write names, or I just wrote, this was when my daughter was already reading by this point. So I actually wrote, sister, father, brother on the sticks themselves. And I used, and I'm going to talk about these more later too, the little Velcro dots that have adhesive on them. I've used those in several of my craft activities. So those are really valuable. And I use them in this one as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Some other tactile family trees. This is just a little one. And again, I use the Velcro dots, but these little apples, they come off, and you can put them in different positions. You can move them around. And this is the same idea for this one. Now, this is a big wall tree that I found at a teacher's store. So it was meant to fill a bulletin board or put on a door or something. But I took it home and I put it on our basement wall. And we put photographs on all of the little leaves that came with it. And again, the kids can take them off, put them on. The whole time they're looking at pictures. We can talk about who each picture is. And it's fun to play around with. And I like these trees too, because you can put anybody on them. This is one of those adaptable projects that you can include anybody in your family unit, in your extended family. So they're really inclusive and adaptable. Heirloom play. I don't know if you've ever heard anyone say heirloom play before. It's kind of a phrase that you probably don't hear that much. But believe it or not, you've got heirlooms that can be played with, and that you can engage in some role play with the children. So this is my daughter. This is my grandmother's cookie tin. Here's my daughter playing with it. It's good solid metal. It's, from the 50s. It's pretty indestructible. But she was putting some of her toy cookies in there. And, this is her recipe. This is her photo. We can make her exact cookies. So believe it or not, you have things in your house that you can role play with the kids and that they can play with and that they won't destroy. I don't have a slide for it, but even like I did a post about introducing kids to old technology. We were at my parents' house one time, and they had a rotary phone. My kids had never seen a rotary phone before, and they were just playing with it like it was the best thing in the world. In the basement, we found a record player that they also were fascinated with. So that type of thing is, it's an heirloom because it belongs to grandma and grandpa, but it's also kind of teaching them culturally about what our technology was like 40, 50 years ago. Okay, so this is one of those interdisciplinary activities. I did several things that incorporated geography, and with the family history and genealogy, that's kind of not hard to do. This circles here, this is not my original idea. I had found that a lot of teachers were using this activity to help teach kids about geography scale. A city is smaller than a state, is smaller than a country. So I adapted it, and we made one for each ancestor, and we put their photo on the top. This was my great-grandfather, so it was my daughter's great-great-grandfather. And so we put his picture on top, and we have the city he came from, the region, the country, and they can flip through those, and I have pictures of the actual maps of those areas, so they can look at the maps. These little rings are great for a lot of the activities I do. And you can find those on Amazon too, or at Michael's. But you loop it together. I laminated it. And again, that's something that's portable that you can take anywhere. And so that was one of my geography activities. Another one was I stuck a wall map on our wall, and we put push pins where our ancestors were from. And then I strung yarn between them, and I printed out these little pictures of ships, and the kids would just sit there and move the ships, from Germany to New York, or from France to New Orleans. And it was just a neat way to talk to them about where their ancestors came from, and then where they entered the United States. And then you could even I didn't have a map of the United States, but you could do the same kind of thing, showing the migration of, an ancestor from the East Coast to the West Coast, or whatever happened in your family history. So that's easy. Just took a world map and some push pins. Flags, kids are fascinated. Every kid seems to go through a phase where they love looking at different nations' flags. So you can recreate the flags of your ancestors. You can use Legos. We had some creative ways of recreating the German flag in one of my posts. So that's something easy you can do. You can color code your different ancestors and just pull out a blank map. There's tons of blank maps that you can download on the internet and print out, and then you can just color in the different countries. So you're learning a little bit of geography along with where your ancestors came from. Okay. I also did a little bit of incorporating math. So I would just print out pictures. This picture shows up pictures of different couples in our family. And we were counting by tens of how long they've been married. And so we do, 10, there's mom and dad, there's grandma and grandpa's, there's great grandma and great grandpa. And my kids were very fortunate to know their great grandparents for a while. So, but you can count by fives, you can count by tens, you can use Legos. You don't have to use these types of blocks. You can use Legos or mega blocks, but counting in intervals like that. And then this is a rudimentary graph and just seeing how they compare. So that was something, again, this was super easy to do. I just had some photos and some blocks and then just sitting down with them and helping them to count it out. Timelines. Timelines are a great way to help kids understand the passage of time and what a year is and what a typical lifespan might look like. It's those concepts are a little bit foreign to them. So there's a couple timelines I'm going to highlight here. Let's see. This is my shoebox timeline, and all it is a shoebox, obviously. And I, again, with the drawing, my son was a voracious artist. So what we did was I got a few pieces of paper here, and this was, we talked about, this was my grandfather's, little bit of a timeline from my grandfather, so his great grandfather. And so we did when he was born, when he graduated high school, when he served in World War II, when he got married, and then when he had his 2 children. So my son drew pictures to represent all of those milestones in his life, and I taped them together, and you could move it through the little slit I cut in the shoebox, and it's almost like you're making a little movie of great grandpa's life. So that was kind of fun to do, and it worked well with my son's interests. And really, all you need for this one is a shoebox, some paper, and some markers. Another timeline we made was just out of cups. This was their great grandma's life here. And I just taped pictures and little blurbs from little newspapers, and I wrote the years down. And the kids can manipulate them. They can either stack them in order or they can lay them out in order. But I think it really helps them visualize, well, 1947 was before 1951. Again, this seems like easy stuff, but kids don't always understand the passage of years and the passage of time. And it helps me, expose them to some neat family photos and cool things about their ancestors' lives. So again, super cheap styrofoam cups. You can use paper cups or plastic cups, and just some tape and a few printed out photos. So super easy. So we're going to go into some activities that involve pretend play and role play. We already talked a little bit about heirlooms and using heirlooms to maybe role play. But I've got a few other activities. Pretend play, role play, it's super important in the development of kids and toddlers. That's why you go to a preschool. Almost all of them have a little dress-up corner. That's why there are play kitchens and play workbenches and all this, fun kind of stuff that the little kids have. So we're going to use that, and I created a couple activities here. This is the Ancestor Puppet Theater. Again, this is just a box I got from Amazon or something. And what I did was I had a popsicle stick, and I printed out a photo. This photo has my great-grandmother in it and my grandmother and her sister. So I printed out that photo and I cut them out and I put them on the popsicle stick. And then I went online and I printed out some background pictures from Cleveland, in the early, I don't know, the 30s or 40s. So I printed out those photos to serve as a background. So, she could take the puppet and, imagine scenarios, imagine where they were going, what they were doing. I think I had one of the backgrounds was a department store, so they could go shopping. I made this little, curtain, so it looked kind of like a theater, but all it really is a wooden dowel with some fabric. And so it's a cute little thing if your kids like to do puppetry. And you can cut out other I think I had another puppet that had my great grandfather in the photo, so he could enter into the scene and what have you. But that was something cute that my daughter really liked. So dressing up for family history. This is actually a still frame from a video that my son actually did. We did a video and he is the Statue of Liberty. And so I think he must have been learning about it in school, and he just kind of put together this little getup, and because he actually knew some facts about it. So I'm pretty sure they were learning about it in school, but I was like, you know what? A bunch of your great-great-grandparents saw that statue when they came to America. And so that was my opportunity to make this about family history. And if you go on my website, the video is posted there. But it was just a cute thing. So you don't always have to dress up as an ancestor. You can dress up as, something or someone that was important to your family history, like the Statue of Liberty. Another role play thing that we did was I did a post called Learning About the Census. First, we read a children's book about the census. It was called Tricking the Tally Man, and it was a picture book. So we read that book first. And then I made these little worksheets. So there's one of the worksheets. And you basically, you had your house number, and then you had space for, a grown man, a grown woman, and then kids. And so you can create your own neighborhood. I think we used little dolls or stuffed animals. I can't even remember, but you can create your own neighborhood. And my daughter went from, family group to family group and kind of tallied up the people. And then I helped her add them up. And that's basically what a census is. If you have neighbors who are good sports, you could actually do this with several of the houses in your neighborhood, or you could create these little groups. If you had like a preschool class, you could create little groups to serve as households. But it was something just fun to do, and it helped give her an idea of, and she liked being the census taker. She had her clipboard and she was in charge. So she was all about counting up her dolls or stuffed animals. So that was something fun that we did kind of as a role play activity. Oh, I just wanted to bring your attention to this one. I created an activity that really didn't have to do specifically with any ancestors or family history, but I created a way to teach my kids how to research and document their research. And this was at a point where my daughter really wasn't reading yet. So I did it, I call it for pre-readers, but they basically had to I had 4 boxes, and in each box I had 3 folders, and they were labeled with big letters on them, A, B, and C. And in each folder was a piece of paper with a flap of a different color. And under that flap was a picture. So she had to go through the boxes and the folders and the flaps and find the strawberry. And then circle, which box was it in, which folder was it in, and what color was it under. And so she circled that, and she had to find all these different pictures. And then we gave the sheet to her brother, and he had to find the same pictures, and he found them a lot faster because she had written down exactly where to find it. So this was again, not specific to genealogy, but kind of specific to any sort of research process. So I thought that was worth mentioning. And they had fun doing it too. Hey, screen time can be okay, especially if it's relating to family history. Coco's a great movie. It's a multi-generational movie. It talks a lot about family, past and present. So that's one of our favorites. Funnily enough, Mulan was one of the best ways that I was able to explain what an ancestor was to my daughter. Because I don't know if you remember in Mulan, in the beginning, there's the shrine, and she goes to the family shrine, and the ancestors are all there, and they're ghosts. But that was a way for me to, sit with her and watch that and kind of explain to her what an ancestor was. So it was actually really helpful. And there's other movies that have family and multi-generational themes that can really help get your discussions going with the kids. But also, I want to encourage you to, now that we have streaming, you can share and watch favorite TV shows or movies from your own childhood with the kids. And, some of them they'll like, and some of them they won't. But this is a really cool way of making connections with kids and helping them to understand what you liked as a kid, or, what was available on TV when you were a kid. So I encourage you to do that. It's a really nice way to get some downtime, but also kind of still teaching them about your life and your history, your personal history. But what if I'm not crafty? Well, that's no excuse. So you can have various family history related things made for you. And I get it. I get it if you're not crafty. And, I never really thought of myself as a crafty person. Some of those activities were so simple with some of the stuff. But if you want no crafting, these items I had made through Shutterfly. Now, there's probably a bunch of other companies now that make these kind of items. But I had some coasters made, and I actually had them make, I did duplicates. So they can be flashcards. They can be a matching game if you turn them over, like a memory game. You can have family photos made into puzzles, which you can set out and have the kids work on while you're talking about the people in the photos. You can have magnets, photo magnets made. And what I would do with these were little, just like 2-inch square magnets. And I had a bunch of them made. But if you put them on a cookie sheet, it becomes kind of this really fun thing that kids can manipulate and play around with. But at the same time, they're looking at family photos. You can also get things like placemats made, so you can kind of surround your kids with family history. There are things like mouse pads. So if you're not crafty, look around on some of those websites and see what appeals to you and what might appeal to the young people in your life. Another thing to consider if you're not crafty, this is what we would call in library land as a passive program. But what I found was it was a whiteboard that was magnetic. So I stuck it on my fridge, and I rotate out various family history documents or photos or news articles, and every couple weeks or so, and I put what it was, I put who was in the picture. And this is just something that my kids are going to pass by multiple times a day, especially because they're teenagers and they are constantly in the kitchen eating. And you know what? They might not want to hear me quote yap about family history as much as I want to, but if they pass by this whiteboard a couple times a day at least, and they see some of these documents and some of these photos, it's going to sink in. So again, this is kind of a passive way to incorporate some family history into your home. And I would, you can put anything up there. I put photos, documents, pictures, Oh, they love seeing their grandparents' pictures and this is their great uncle when he was a teenager, but that's kind of fun stuff. And then news articles. So that's just something to consider. Again, something easy once the kids are reading, and especially for older kids like your teenagers, and actually for spouses too. This one here, this is an article of my husband's grandparents and the description of their marriage. So that's probably something he would have never seen if it weren't for me, but that's okay. And so it helps everybody in the family. As far as other posts on my website, I have several. They're not specific activities, but I'm calling them compiled tips and advice blog posts. This one was 31 easy ways to engage children in family history. And this is like little stuff like sing a song that your grandmother used to sing to you, or read a book that you loved in your childhood. But it's just quick little things that make it easy to share family history in small bites. There's another one called the Kid-Friendly Family Reunion. And this is how to incorporate good logistics and planning and activities and all that good stuff into making sure that the kids at a family reunion feel included and feel, just safe and that they're having fun. And so, this is if you're planning a family reunion, but a lot of it's common sense stuff, like put them in comfortable clothes. No one wants to, be in church clothes all day at a fun family reunion, but little stuff like that. And then another one I made was the Young Mom's Guide to Saving Family History. At the time, I was a young mom, no longer. But just, again, little things like make sure you take pictures of your babies with, their elder family members. And maybe start taking control of some of the family history stuff that your parents have in their possession when you can. But it's a lot of other little stuff that you can do when you're busy and tired, even as a young mom. So that's another good one. Let's move on to older kids and teens. What's great is that obviously cognitively you can do more with older kids and teens. But I still want to say that the basic tenets that you use with younger kids still hold true. You want to use their own interests. You don't want to force them to do anything they don't want to do. See what, make sure you know what interests them, and don't try to force anything. Don't assume that they have better attention spans than the little kids, because I'm telling you, it's not always the case. Small chunks of family history still works best. Older kids can help with more things, digitization projects. If they're computer people, get them to create a family history website. They already do Instagram posts and TikTok, so maybe they can TikTok some of their family history. There are people that do it, by the way. There are TikToks of people's family history. If they are kind of more of an outgoing individual, maybe they could do some family member interviews. And I've noticed that elder family members will often tell the youngest generation more about their past than they will some of the intermediate generations. So that's something to keep in mind if your older child or your teen is a little bit more outgoing, doesn't mind asking questions, doesn't mind talking. That's a task that you can kind of give them. I, as a teen, was not like that, but I loved photography. So I took a lot of photos when I was a teen. And so each kid now has a photo machine in their pocket, and they can take their phone wherever they are, and take photos at family events. And then, those will go towards the history of the family. We can share them easily, and they can be the photographers. They can also examine records and family ephemera. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. These are a couple of blog posts that I did that would apply to older kids and teens. I did one called Directory Detectives, where we looked at directories and examined them. And, it's kind of cool when you have the directory key and you're looking at all the abbreviations and you're trying to decode what each directory entry says. So you can have the kids do that. You can have them look for, the surnames that you're interested in. You can look to see if there's other people with those same surnames, or look to see if there's, who's living with them, and might that be a clue into the relationships of certain people, even if they have different surnames. I did a post called Examining Ephemera. I don't even think kids know what ephemera is these days. We're kind of losing our ephemera. Ticket stubs don't exist anymore. Postcards really aren't that much of a thing. But my grandmother left behind a ton of these little ephemera pieces of her life. So we looked at those and we kind of examined them. Where are they from? When did this event take place? Why do you think she saved this? Why was this important to her to help her remember? So that's something, if you have some family history ephemera laying around, that's something you can bring out and talk to the kids about. And it's kind of an easy discussion. And they're often very fascinated by some of the things. Like my grandmother had a dance card in her pile of stuff. And, my kids had no idea what a dance card was. So it's also very educational culturally to look at some of these things. Map reading at the cemetery. So I took my kids to one of the local cemeteries here. This was right after I moved back to the Cleveland area, and I wanted to visit my great-grandparents' graves, and I literally did not know where they were in this massive cemetery. So we stopped at the office. They gave us maps. They told us she circled it. And then I had the kids help me, turn in the right place, make sure we're going in the right direction, down the right path. So that's map reading's always a skill that is useful. So and we eventually did find the graves. So it incorporated family history and this kind of geographical spatial awareness of map reading. So that's really good for older kids to do too. Now, when you get to specifically teenagers, it actually gets really cool, because once kids get into middle school and beyond, they are capable of seeing themselves within the larger story of their family history. And they're able to reflect more on their position in life relative to what their ancestors experienced, if that makes sense. So I created a couple activities here. One was called Back to School Blessings. And what we did was we looked at the 1940 census, and there's a field that says highest grade of school completed. And so we looked at our ancestors listed in that census, seeing how far they got educationally, and then how far, just knowing my relatives, how far the educational levels of the subsequent generations went. So it's very eye-opening to see the progression. Like, for example, my great-grandmother had put the number 2. She had the number 2 on that 1940 census. And her daughter completed high school. And then several of her grandchildren got graduate degrees. So this was very eye-opening to my kids to see that progression just within a couple generations of how, and I think it helped them realize how fortunate they are to be able, even though, nobody's a fan of school when they're that age, how fortunate they are to have those educational opportunities, especially looking back and seeing where our family came from. Another activity, and this one was a little bit more reflective, it's called Our Ancestors' Wildest Dreams, which I'm sure you've heard the quote, "I am my ancestors' wildest dream." And so this asks kids to speculate about what their ancestors' hopes and dreams were, both for themselves and their families and their descendants, and then for the kids to look at their own lives and see how they may or may have fulfilled some or all of those dreams. And then it asks them to kind of think about what are their dreams for their potential descendants. So it's a very reflective activity. It involves a little bit of writing, which isn't a bad thing. But what I can also say about the teens and older kids, I'm learning this right now, even if your teens and older kids aren't bitten by the genealogy bug, it's okay. And that doesn't mean that they haven't derived value from what you've taught them, even if it's just been in small bits. There's always a possibility that they will pick it up later in life, and you've given them that foundation to build upon. So it's been worth it in my experience, even though, you know, they're not sitting on Ancestry in their free time, like I am, and going through family history and looking at family documents. A lot of the benefit, like we talked about at the beginning, is them just knowing they come from this grand story of a family and of several different peoples from different countries. And hopefully that gives them that better sense of self, and knowing some of the adversities that our people have been through, they can carry that with them. So that is all I have. Now, I mentioned that I haven't really added to the website in a while, but that I've kept the website up, and I'd like to be able to do that. The host that I'm using for the website they're going to be doubling their fees. So in a year or so, I might have to make a decision on what to do with it. But if the web address changes, it wouldn't be a huge change. And I'm hopeful that I can keep it up. But again, everything's free on the site. You're free to use it as you wish, with, you know, whatever groups you're with. But I think that is all I have to share, and I'm definitely open to any questions.
Our first one, this person's wondering about maybe programs that you've done or that you've seen at local societies or local libraries for children in genealogy, with maybe some larger groups, and kind of what you've experienced with that.
That's a good question, because I haven't really seen too many. Even our library system, the system I work in, there is one gal in one of our branches who does, she doesn't necessarily do genealogy, but she has a regular homeschool group that comes in, and they do, it's almost like cultural groups, and they'll cook something from France, or they'll cook something, you know, from Mexico. And they kind of, she tries to be a little more open-ended about it, but that's the closest thing I can think of to anything with large groups. None of the societies in my area, as far as I know, have done anything. It's hard. Well, it's all volunteer, so we you know, we have to respect everyone's time, and it's a lot of planning. But it's almost like you would need to just set up a table or two at a community fair, or I know some libraries have library fairs where different community organizations come in and share things. I do have some things on the website, like family history crossword puzzles and other little games that are kind of useful if you're doing a big group, or if you're having several groups of people in one, you know, location. I'm thinking of our historical society in Cleveland, and I'm not sure that they've ever done anything to my knowledge. So it's very rare. And I'd love to see more of it.
Yeah, lots of good things to think about.
Yeah.
I liked your your example of the census takers, that'd be an interesting one if they could be census takers for each other, asking about each other's families. So yeah, lots of good ideas. Another question is, so with children, since sometimes they have shorter attention spans, so when you're working with them on an activity and maybe you notice their engagement is a little bit is not there as much, what tricks do you have to kind of re-engage them, or how do you do that?
Sometimes if you pull a snack onto the table next to whatever you're doing, that might help. A little bit of some little goldfish crackers or something. But honestly, a lot of times I let them go and they went and did their own thing. And then at some point later, I brought them back and we finished. And it's those small little chunks that you kind of have to work with, and let the child kind of direct how much they want to do at any one time. And it's not ideal, especially if you're like dealing with like paints or something that you have to get out and put back. But it seemed to work best for my kids. Again, that doesn't work for all kids. So it's kind of depends on the child, it's themselves.
I think that'll finish us up for this evening, but I wanted to thank you again so much for a great presentation, and thank you to everybody for attending. I just wanted to mention that if anybody would like a copy of the chat, or if you have additional questions, please email us at genealogy@acpl.info and we can get that to you. So thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.